Welcome to Reinventing Perspectives. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Donna Renee Patrick, and she's an award winning author, radio host, and transformational speaker. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, Donna. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
So have I, Priscilla. I have been looking forward to this. I'm so very excited to be with you this morning. Thank you for having me on. My name is Donna Renee Patrick. I'm a worship leader and author. I reside in Dallas, Texas, and I serve at the New Mount Gilead Church here in Dallas. And I'm a musician, worship leader, choir director, radio host, and I love what I do. I love what I do. And worship ministry is my passion. That's what I love, and I do a lot of training in praise and worship ministry so that the church understands that it's not all about the music. It's not all about the music. There's so much more to praise and worship than just great music. So I love helping people understand that.
Donna, I have to tell you that we had another guest on the show who was also in kind of like entertainment industry.
Okay.
And boy, did he school me. He said, listen, people forget that people in entertainment, we are also entrepreneurs. We are
Yes.
entrepreneuring, and people just don't look at it that way because a lot of
Yeah.
times we are the brand and we are the product, but we are entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So,
I agree. I agree. You are your own brand. You are the brand. You know, Priscilla, I attended a networking event. It was kind of a networking business conference, kind of. And one of the instructor who taught the marketing and branding class, her main point was your brand is just as important as Coca-Cola or BMW or, some other, household names that we see on a daily basis. She said your brand is just as important as theirs. And she said, remember, you are your brand. It's not your product. It's not what you bring. You are the brand. And I thought that was interesting.
yeah, that's a great takeaway. I tell you, when I had this conversation with the guest that I'm referring to,
Yeah.
it was like when he told me that what people don't realize is the showmanship that we have to bring on top of being entrepreneurs.
Agreed. Agreed. Because we do have a message. We do
Mm,
have a message. And we do have a message to bring to the world. We do have a product. And we're always mindful. Entrepreneurs are always mindful that people we have to solve a problem. We bring solutions to the problem. That's all people really care about. They care, can you solve my problem? That's what people care about. And as entrepreneurs, that is what we have to be ever mindful of. What problem are we solving?
yeah, this is a great start. Absolutely, I'm excited for this. Now, Donna, tell us, how did your journey begin? How did you get into being a worship leader consultant?
You know what, Priscilla, that is an excellent question, and it's a loaded question because it truly has been a journey, and it continues to be a journey. Years ago, I've been a musician for three-fourths of my life, but about 20 years ago or so, the Lord began to deal with me in the area of praise and worship. And God began to show me over time that there's more to this. And he said, my people need to be taught biblical praise and worship. And it's not that everybody was off the grid. It's not that at all. It's just that we were so focused on the music that we didn't think about what the word really has to say, what God requires of us. And so part of my journey, when I was serving at a church here in Dallas, the pastor called me into his office. I was a musician on staff there. And he called me into his office and he said, Donna, I want to add a praise and worship class to our Sunday school curriculum. And I said, okay. He said, I want you to teach it. I said, okay, that's a first. So I don't know why he asked me, Priscilla, but he did. And so that's where it really started because the more I learned about praise and worship, the more I wanted to learn. And so the Lord lit a fire under me all those years ago when I taught that class. And as time has gone by, the fire has just gotten larger. And God has just continued to pour wood on the fire. And so I it's a passion. It's a passion of mine, and it's part of my purpose right now.
So really, I think this is the first time I've heard anyone actually speak about praise and worship in this way. And
Really? Okay. Well,
yes, absolutely, because like you said, I think a lot of people, including myself, we just think of the music.
yeah. Yeah, and there's so much more to it. This music is great. I'm not saying we don't need the music. That's not my point at all. I'm just saying we cannot allow music to be the focus because we could sing all the great music in the world. We can sing all the hot music, hot off the charts. We can do that. We can have some of the best musicians in the world in our services. But if we have not invited God in, if we have not released our hearts and opened our hearts up to his presence, well then we sang some great music, but was God really present in what we did? That's all my point. Was he present?
For someone who's listening to this, who's aspiring to be in the music business as a Christian artist,
Yeah.
like what would you tell them about one, the artist side, and two, really about the business side of, of everything?
As far as the artist side, the first thing I would suggest to them is to hone your craft. Hone your craft. Practice your craft. Um, Resist the temptation to feel like I play better than him or I do it better than her. Hone your craft. And as an artist, stay away from comparison because God gave you a message. God gave you a message. So hone your craft, practice, be prepared for when the opportunity comes on the artist side. On the business side, I would suggest, first of all, ask yourself a question. What is my why? Why do I want to get into the business side? Why do I want to do this? Is it because of money? Is it because I want to be up there with whomever, my favorite artist? Is it because I want people to see me up here? So my first question on the business side would be ask yourself why. What is my why? Why do I want to get into the business side of it? You know, and then the other thing I'll say about the business side, go in as a servant. Have a servant mindset, not just to be served. Don't go in just to say what they can do for me. What can I do for them? How can I model myself as a servant? Um, Build relationships on the business side as well. Build relationships. Talk to other people that you know who may be in the business, or people that you want to be in the business with. Have a know your why. Know your why about getting in the business. Have an attitude of a servant and build relationships because all of that is going to serve you well when you get into the business. Having an attitude of a servant, not just for what they can do for me. How can I serve? That's what Jesus came to do. Jesus said, I came not to be served, but to serve.
You find that even though we think it's different, it's actually not different from anything else that any entrepreneur is doing. That
I agree. Yeah.
having a servant's heart, if you are a Christian entrepreneur, you will win every single time because people can feel the intention behind something.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Absolutely. People know when we're real and when we're not. People are very smart. They know when we're real and when we're not. So we've got to present as a servant. What can I do to help you?
Donna, I know this is gonna be. I know a lot of people think it, so I said, since I have you, I'm gonna ask you because
Okay.
a
Okay.
lot of times there are boxes, and in the music industry, and if you want to be, an entrepreneur in that space, it's like you're either circular, right, all the way circular, or
Sure.
you're either all the way Christian. And
Yeah.
if you're on either sides, people don't want to see you, or they feel a certain way about you being, being Christian and trying to sing circular music at the same time, or the other
Yes.
way around.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought, since I got someone in the biz, I gotta ask, what's your take on that?
You know, another loaded question. And it's a very interesting and relevant question too, Priscilla. It's a very relevant question because we face it all the time. Um, Now, for me, I grew up in the church, and so gospel music has pretty much been my niche. That's pretty much been my niche. I have played on the secular side before, but it didn't stick. It didn't stick. It's just not where I was comfortable. But there are some artists who do both. And so again, it may beg the question, which am I? It may beg the question, who between secular and gospel, who am I? And if you're playing both, if you're playing both, Priscilla, my heart is eventually you're going to have to choose. It eventually you're going to have to, in your own heart and mind, you're going to have to choose which side do I want to play on. Um, it happens. I have gospel music friends who also play on the secular side. Now, what I believe about giftings, Priscilla, is that God gave us a gift. If God presented you that gift of music, whether playing or writing, singing, whatever the case may be, use that gift to glorify Him, whether it be on the gospel or the secular side. Recognize where the gift came from, is what I'm saying to you. And I don't condemn anybody. I don't condemn anybody for utilizing their gift on the secular side. I don't. That's between them and God. But I believe at some point, and you've heard secular artists. Whitney Houston didn't make her money in gospel music, but she came from the church. She made her money on the secular side, but we all know where Whitney came from. She came from the church, and so did Aretha Franklin. Aretha made her money on the secular side, but her roots were in the church. So I believe music, whether it be singing or playing or songwriting, um, whatever your niche might be in that area, God gave you that gift. So whether you go secular, whether you go gospel, God recognized where the gift came from. And whichever side you function on, recognize, use that gift from Him for His glory. That's how I'll answer that.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that answer, because I think a lot of people who are listening also, because people have a lot of views and a lot of opinions,
Sure.
and you find that especially with our audience that is early entrepreneurs, a lot of
Yes.
the reasons that people don't take action is because of being afraid of the opinions of others and how you may look and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to
Hmm.
have someone kind of say to you, at the end of the day, recognize the giver of the gift and seek his
Absolutely.
glory wherever, however, in the
Absolutely.
marketplace or wherever. So,
Absolutely. And you have to know your purpose, Priscilla. That goes in the equation as well. You have to know your purpose. And I'm glad that you mentioned many of us are worried about, we don't take action because we're worried about what people are going to say. What are they going to think of me? You know, your purpose is yours and yours alone. And the people who are talking, the people who are chattering, well, maybe they don't know their purpose. So they'd rather talk about you. They'd rather spend time talking about you than learn what their own purpose is and walk in that. So I just want to encourage somebody, if you're concerned about what people are going to think, don't be. Don't be. Um, this is the gift God gave you, and walk in that to glorify Him. And let the people talk. Let them talk. Especially if, no, I mean, if you're doing something, if it's legal, you're doing something legal, it's nothing, it's something, you know, but if you know that you're exercising your gift for the glory of God, let them talk and you go ahead and go forward.
you know, I try to think of it in this way, that in your purpose is where your power lies.
Absolutely.
And
I
it's no
completely agree.
wonder that all these things, the moment you started to recognize your purpose, all these things started happening to kind of distract you, to
Yeah.
discourage you, to
Yeah.
make you shy, to make you afraid of taking action. And because the moment you step into that purpose,
Yeah.
that's it.
I
So,
completely agree. And you said something so key. There's power in your purpose. And I completely agree with that. Priscilla, I just did a 3-day challenge on purpose, on knowing your purpose, why it's important to walk in your purpose, why you should stick with your purpose and not someone else's. So, purpose is a big deal, whether music, whether artistry, business, entrepreneurship. Purpose is a big deal for all of us. Yeah.
for the person who says, I'm not sure what my purpose is, or I'm trying to find my purpose, like, what would you say to that person, Donna? Like,
We may be walking in our purpose, but we never looked at it that way. I heard a message from a Bishop T.D. Jakes one time. He said, your purpose might be hidden in the things that bother you. I said, really? But one thing that's connected to your purpose is passion. If it's a passion for you, search your heart. What are your passions? What do you love to do? What is it that bothers you that you have a solution to? That may be the key to finding your purpose. And what bothers you? It bothered me, Priscilla, as an example. It bothered me years ago that a lot of churches, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians and singers felt like as long as we sang great music that we've worshiped. That bothered me because as I began to learn what biblical worship was and as I began to learn what God requires of us in worship, it began to bother me that we thought it was all about the music. And so I started doing workshops. I started teaching. I started writing devotionals about it, praise and worship themed devotionals, because it bothered me. But God gave me a solution. He gave me something to do about it. In my little corner of the world. He gave me something to do about it. So your purpose might be hidden in the things that bother you because you have a solution to change that thing. And then look at what you most love to do. Look at what you love to do. Look at what your giftings are. And take those things to God and ask him how he wants you to carry those things out. That's just my take on finding your purpose.
for sharing that. I said, since you mentioned that you're coming from a 3-day purpose workshop, I said, let me jump in there when everything is hot
Yeah,
everything's
yeah.
hot and you're like on fire for purpose. Let me get some nuggets and we're talking to you.
It's important. It's important. Priscilla, so many people go through life not knowing what their purpose really is, but nor have they sought to find out. They don't know how to find out. And so ask God, because he's the one who can tell you without a doubt what your purpose is and how he wants you to carry that out in the earth.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Donna. Now let me jump back to being a musician and wanting to be an entrepreneur in that space. Like, what mindset should one have for them to reach their potential in this field? Because I feel like, just like I probably even more than other fields, I feel like the competition is a lot more stiff.
Oh,
I feel
absolutely.
like what success means in that space is a lot more um, narrow. So
hmm
I'd just like to just get your take on, the kind of mindset that you need to have if you're thinking
It,
about.
you mentioned competition, um, and sometimes in the business, competition will tempt you to compromise your principles, compromise what you believe, compromise your relationship with the Lord, um, because you're competing in that space. You're competing for the not only for the attention, but you're trying to catch the eye of the right executives in that space. But be careful not to compromise who you are. It's possible that you may be presented with an opportunity that may be great. It may be wonderful, great exposure for you. But be careful that you're not compromising your own principles, what you believe as an individual, as a Christian. So be very careful of that. I would suggest, read the fine print, of course, when you're presented with a contract, for example. Be sure to read the fine print or have an attorney to do it for you so that you don't miss something. Now you maybe gave a cursory look over the contract, but there may be some language in there that maybe you did not understand just coming into the business. And so it's easy to get sidetracked. It's easy to be hoodwinked by language in a contract that you didn't understand. So I would certainly suggest read it very carefully or have an attorney or someone you trust to really help you understand that contract so you know what you're getting yourself into.
Absolutely. For me on this show, I always push three things. I always say the faith, the mindset, because without the
Yeah,
mindset, you can't make it, and you need to sharpen the business acumen. For entrepreneurs, I'm like, you need to really, really sharpen the business acumen because the higher you go, the more that's going to be the difference between, like you said, you sign a contract that you don't know what it means,
yeah,
or and you compromise yourself and you don't even know that you've compromised yourself in some way.
absolutely. And it can happen, Priscilla. It can happen. It can happen. So absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, you want to succeed. Yes, you've chosen something great to do, but be careful. Just be careful and be careful, be mindful, be watchful. Be watchful and pray before you go in. Pray before you go in. If you have a meeting, for example, with an executive, if you have a meeting with a songwriter, pray before you go and ask God for discernment. Ask him for the wisdom so that you know what's being said, you know which direction you need to head, and then you recognize when something just doesn't sound right. You reckon when you have the wisdom and the discernment, you'll recognize when something just doesn't sound quite right, and you can make the necessary adjustments.
Donna, tell us, what is next level worship?
Next level worship is knowing what God requires of us. Like I can say it best this way. There's a passage of scripture, Priscilla, Isaiah 29, verse 13, that says, "These people come near." Jesus says, "These people come near me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." And next level worship means that your heart is number one. Is your heart connected with him? Next level worship means I'm not just raising my hands because the worship leader said so. I'm raising them because out of surrender to my God. That's what next level worship involves. We know that God is the focus, not the music. We know God is the focus. His presence is the focus. And we understand that if my heart's not involved, then I'm really not connecting with him. In a nutshell, that's what next level worship looks like. And when the leaders, I'm of the heart that when the leaders worship, well, then the followers will worship as well. And we see that in Revelation chapters 4 and 5. When the pastors and the executive pastors and the Christian education leaders, when they develop as worshipers, then those of us who follow them, we will worship as well because the leaders are setting the example for what worship really is. So that's what next level worship looks like.
Donna, tell us, who influenced you in your life?
You know what? I have to start with my mom. My mother raised us to love the Lord. She had a relationship with the Lord herself, and so she raised us to have my sisters and I to have a relationship with him. So my mother was a big influence on my life. There were other people. I had family members. I had other people in my church. There were deacons in my church. There were other sisters, older mothers of the church who influenced me. There have been artists who influenced my life and my ministry. James Cleveland, of course. Joe Pace influenced. There's so many, many different artists, but I stand on so many, many shoulders, Priscilla. I stand on so many shoulders who poured into me, and there have been churches along the way, relationships I've made with singers and artists and different conventions I've been to, who've poured into me and to help me be who the worship leader that I am. And, you know, a big influence on me has been the International Worship Institute. They convened in Dallas for probably at least 15, 16 years. And they changed my ministry. They changed my ministry because they modeled what real worship looks like. And so I took all that in. And so I stand on a lot of shoulders, Priscilla. And my mother, I do what I do today because of my mom.
Now, you've written 2 award-winning devotionals.
Hmm.
Donna. Amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, walk us through the process. What's the process of writing an award-winning devotional? What's your process?
Well, first of all, in 2012, I had never done it before, never written a book before. So it was a completely new experience for me. And I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory, how I got there, Priscilla. I began around 2008 or 9, somewhere back there. I began sending out devotionals every Friday. And they were devotionals based on praise and worship. And a lot of my experiences were in there and things I've lived through and things that I've, as a worship leader, as an employee, all of that. So I was sending out these devotionals, and I did that for maybe a year or so. And the church I was serving in at the time, he said, "Why don't you put all those into a book?" I said, "Oh, I never thought about it." And so I just kind of, I heard him, but I really didn't act on it. Well, I keep on writing. God keeps giving me these devotionals to send out via email every Friday. I would come home from work on Thursday, and Thursday night I would go in my office and I'd crank out these devotionals and send them out on Friday. Well, I thought about what my pastor said, and some time passed. About a year went by before I really acted on his advice. Well, I did. And so, I already had the material. All I had to do was organize it in some fashion. And so I went looking for publishers, traditional and self-publishers, and I decided to self-publish. And so I found a company that assists people who want to self-publish. I went with them. They gave me the package to go by. So I put the manuscript together. I took all those chapters, all those devotionals, and put them in chapters. I organized them into chapters. I sent off the manuscript, and in about 8 or 9 weeks, we had a book with my name on it. I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm an author." It was amazing. And when I first went on Amazon and I searched my name and it popped up with my book, I said, "Oh God, look, Lord, look what you've done." So it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing to see my name in the author space. It was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. And I would share anybody who was wanting to write a book. And Priscilla, you've been down that road already. I would share with anybody who wants to write a book, be careful choosing your publisher, because you want someone who really gets your message. They get it. And they won't water it down. They won't water down your message. Because at the end of the day, it's your book. It's your message. You know the message you're trying to get out to the world. And with the wrong publisher, they might water down your message. And your book won't be the caliber that you want it to be. Your message won't get out there the way you want it to get out there. So go with the right publisher. Do your research. Go with the right publisher, because the right publisher is going to grab hold to your message. They're going to get it. They're going to get it. And now they'll help you hone it. They'll help you hone your message. They'll help you sharpen it, but they won't water it down. So I would say that to anybody who's wanting to write a book. Hold on to your message, because you have a message for the world.
I think you touched on two really, really key things there. I mean, first of all, just the fact that when you get an idea, to just act on it. You don't know where it's going to lead to. And a lot of
I
times
had no
people do the
idea.
opposite. You're waiting to become an author, but you've never written, you haven't even written anything to anybody.
Yeah,
Or to,
yeah,
even for yourself, you haven't written anything, but you're waiting for the author. And the opportunities will come if you keep faithfully moving with whatever it is that you feel that you've been led to do. So thank you for sharing that. And like
yeah.
you said, the other thing is also about watering down messages. I have to tell you, when I started writing, and I was just writing, my blogs, and I was just
Uh-huh.
writing on other people's blogs.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
did come down to that, where
yeah.
sometimes I would write something and it would be edited to the point where it doesn't even sound like something that I wrote.
Yes, absolutely. And you don't want that. You don't want that, because your message is your message, and you know how you want to get it out there. So yeah, I understand. And I'm glad that you recognize that. Absolutely. Because it can
And
happen.
even,
Yeah.
oh, absolutely. And especially even in the Christian space, because sometimes people say they want Christian writers, but they want you to kind of be, like you said, a little bit watered down when they're putting out the content to their readers.
You're a Christian artist, if you're a Christian author, if you're an aspiring author, stick with your principles, stick with God. God gave you the idea in the first place. God gave you the idea in the first place. That's where it came from. So don't compromise your faith. Don't compromise your faith. Stick with what God gave you, and stick with what you know pleases Him.
What are some of your favorite praise and worship pieces that you just absolutely love over time
Oh, girl.
in terms of
Oh,
songs?
girl.
Yeah.
Oh, girl. I love Holy is the Lord. I love Holy is the Lord, by Chris Tomlin. I love that. I love Martha Menezes' Shout. Shout with a voice of triumph. Takes me in every time. I love Heart of Worship by Matt Redman. I love it. I love Heart of Worship. I love I Lift Up My Hands by Israel Houghton. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I love that song. I Lift Up My Hands. I love How Great Is Our God. Love it. Takes me in every time. Songs that really lift him up. I have so many. That's a few of them. That's a few of them. I love Alive and Breathing by Matt Maher. I love that one. So I have so many.
Be nice to have a sneak peek into the playlist of a worship leader.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Welcome. That's a sneak peek. Exactly. That's a sneak peek. That's exactly what that was. Because I have so many. Yeah.
Donna, I have to ask you this because I think this is really important. How do we make worship part of our daily life?
We do that by recognizing everything, all of who we are is tied to our worship. Worship is wrapped up in everything that we are, from head to foot. Worship is wrapped up in that. When we recognize that God called all of us to worship Him, nobody's left out. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. When you make worship part of your daily life, you understand that you are under divine mandate to worship God. And we know that from John chapter 4, 23 and 24. Jesus said God wants those who worship Him to do so in spirit and in truth. So everything that we do, Priscilla, everything that we are, worship is tied to it. It's tied to our worship. How we work. What kind of employees are we? What kind of bosses are we? Um, how do we deal with our families? How do we relate to our spouses? How do we build relationship in everyday life. How do we view our respective ministries? All of that, all of those are expressions of worship. If you are a student, whether in be it from high school on up to the postgraduate level, how you get your studies, how you prepare for your lessons, how you prepare for your exams, how you go through that semester, all of that is tied to our worship, because all of who we are, God put worship into every fiber of our being. So how we live our lives with that knowledge, knowing that everything that we are is tied to our worship, that's how we make it an everyday lifestyle. And starting your day with worship, ending your day with worship, throughout the day recognizing who God is and what He's done in your life, that is making worship a lifestyle. We make it a lifestyle, knowing, recognizing that God is God and He is the object of our worship. He gave us our lives. He gave us our businesses. He gave us our spouses. He gave us our families. He gave us every dream, every goal, every plan that we've made for our lives. God gave it to us. God planted all of that. So everything that we are points to the worship of God. If we handle that correctly. That's what I would say.
Oh, wow. I think I could stop right now because that's the message. That's the message for us today. So
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
audience and I myself, I feel really, really challenged to
Yeah.
take up worship as part of my daily life. Now, Donna,
Absolutely.
what is the number one book that you would recommend for someone aspiring to do what you've done?
Okay. There's a book by Bob Sorge, Sorge. There's a book by Bob Sorge called Exploring Worship. And it's really a wonderful manual for anyone who wants to grow closer to God in worship. You don't have to be a worship leader or hold a position, or be in a ministry. You just want to get closer to God. Exploring Worship is a book I would definitely recommend for anyone. Another one is called Prophetic Worship, and the author is Vivian Hibbert. And Vivian gives us such a beautiful picture of what prophetic worship is. So if you want to grow as a worshiper, those two books are excellent. Exploring Worship and Prophetic Worship. Matt Redman has a book out there on worship as well. Um, so those are excellent recommendations on the worship side. On the author side, I didn't write it down. But Priscilla, I'd be happy to send it to you later. I didn't write it down, but there's an excellent book that I have, and I don't have it here in front of me. It's in the other room. But it's an excellent book for aspiring authors, if that is what you want to do. I have a book, and I'd be happy to send you that link or send you that information after we conclude. I don't have it here in front of me.
Oh, thank you. I'll add that to the show notes, and anyone who's thinking about being an aspiring author, do check out the show notes for that. Now, Donna, where can people go to learn a little bit more about you and what you do?
They can go to my website. They can go to www.donnareneepatrick.com, and they can go to the store. My books are there on donnareneepatrick.com. They can go there. I am on Facebook, and my social media handles are the same across the networks. So if you go to Donna Renee Patrick MA on Facebook, I'm there. I am on Instagram. They can go to LinkedIn. They can find me there. Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, send me an email. Send me an email at donnareneepatrick@gmail.com.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us, Donna.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we had this conversation because I feel like every entrepreneur, music or otherwise,
Yeah.
this message that you've just shared is just
Yeah.
true. Being true
Yeah.
to your purpose, being true to
Yeah.
understanding that God is the giver of the gift,
Yeah.
God is the one who gives you the business.
That's
And
right.
wow.
Yeah. And even, I'll say this too, even as an entrepreneur, whether you're already in business or whether you want to be and you want to start a business, keep the attitude of a servant. Keep the attitude of a servant. No matter how long you've been in business, always show up to serve. Always show up to serve. And what can you do for your clients? How can you help your clients? Always show up with a servant mindset.
True. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Now, our last question is always, Donna, what has faith meant to you on your journey?
And again, the key word is journey. That's the key word. It has been a journey. It continues to be. If I didn't trust God, and I'll tell you a very personal story. I'll share something with you, Priscilla. Um, if I didn't trust God, if I wasn't walking by faith and faith alone, I would get frustrated. I would get upset and angry, and I would be crying, and I would be, you know, because when I got in my head, when I was all in my head, rather than walking by faith in God, well, it affected my attitude. My attitude just wasn't what it ought to have been. I was unsettled. I was impatient, and that the patience is a whole nother matter for me. That's a whole nother show. Um, but my faith has taught me to be patient. My faith has taught me to look at God rather than look at myself, rather than look at all of what I want to do, what my plans are. My faith has taught me to ask God, what are your plans? Lord, you know what my plans are. You know what I want. But God, what do you want? That's what faith has done for me. Faith has shifted my focus off of me and what I want to do onto what He would have me do. That's how I will answer that. And faith has taught me to be patient. Faith has taught me to walk in wisdom, because I believe wisdom waits. We like to act right away. We want to act right now. We want to act now. Well, sometimes you got to use wisdom. And see, faith has taught me that. Faith has taught me to wait before making a decision. Faith has taught me to be patient and stop trying to do it all myself. Stop trying to fix it myself. Stop trying to, get ahead of God. Get ahead of God, because when I'm not walking in faith, I can get ahead of God, and that's not where I need to be. So faith has taught me to walk with God, not ahead of Him. So patience is a big deal for me. Faith has taught me to be patient. And God has put me in situations where I had to be patient, because He's taught me that moving too quickly, I'll get myself in trouble. So I've got to stay in faith and keep my eyes on Him.
Oh, thank you so much for that. A great message for all the audience that's listening, all the entrepreneurs. Stay in
Yeah,
faith and let's win at business, guys. Thank you, Donna.
absolutely.
I'm honored to have you on, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Likewise, Priscilla, thank you for having me. God bless you, my sister. I've had a great time. I've had a great time. Thank you.